The summer movie season has come to a close, and I've seen a stacked list of 38 movies in the summer. So I'm going to rank all 38 summer 2024 movies that I saw, from the worst to the best in my opinion. But I'm not going to bother explaining who I am or anything, because let's just get straight into this big ranking. In last place, Tarot, a horror movie that just does everything that I don't like about horror movies. It has all the stupid characters, even some of the cliches are used. Not much of it works. It's not a movie I could find myself going back to. I don't enjoy it. The acting is terrible. The story is terrible. Very stereotypical. I don't enjoy it. It comes in last. Number 37, Poolman. If you don't know what Poolman is, this is Chris Pine's directorial debut that he also starred in and wrote, and it is absolutely dreadful. I think of all the movies I've seen this year, this one's probably the one that was the biggest slog just to get through. It's only like an hour and 40 minutes long, and I struggled to finish it because as a comedy, it's not really that funny. As a thriller, it lacks any tension or engagement in the story, so overall, just one that is a real big dud. Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie. This is the Sandy Cheeks movie that has been in development for a few years. It dropped on Netflix in the beginning of August, and it is dreadful. Like, doing a SpongeBob movie, I feel like the only way you could possibly make it work is with SpongeBob and Patrick. Here you get SpongeBob and Sandy being the main character. It dives into her family and stuff that you're just not all that interested in. The plot, once again, isn't engaging. And it dives into this whole idea about Sandy's family, who you don't really care about. You don't even know their names. You're probably just going to forget them afterwards. So, overall, as a big fan of SpongeBob, just not a good movie at all. Number 35, Unfrosted. Unfrosted is the Jerry Seinfeld comedy that dropped on Netflix. And I'm using the word comedy very loosely here because this movie isn't very funny. Everything that made Jerry Seinfeld funny when he had his own TV show just seems to be completely gone here. It feels so much more like a 90-minute long SNL skit that feels much longer than 90 minutes because it has the SNL sense of humor, the cast members from SNL, the set design, the color scheme. It just all looks really off like an SNL skit. I do not enjoy this movie. It's not funny. 34, The Mousetrap, or Mickey's Mousetrap. This is a low-budget, independent Mickey Mouse horror movie that ever since Mickey Mouse entered the public domain, they make this horror movie, release it at the beginning of August once again, and this is a weird list of summer movies where the Mickey Mouse movie is not in last place on this list, but it's a very low budget movie and copyright infringement, but I would say it's a so bad it's good movie. Not good by any means necessary, but it's only an hour and 20 minutes long. It's watchable enough if you get all your friends together to poke fun at it. There are a bunch of ridiculous sequences here, and so as just a horror movie, it's terrible. But as a so bad it's good movie, if you could just embrace the silliness, there's a little bit more fun to be had here than the movies at the bottom of this list. I Saw the TV Glow. I was a little bit late to this one. This is an A24 kind of horror-esque film and also mystery-esque film at the same time. This one, I know a lot of people love. It just simply wasn't for me. This is very much like elevated horror, as A24 horror films have been. I didn't really understand the metaphors. I didn't relate with all the allegories that were put into the film. It's just not a movie that connected with me all that much. And just its pacing was really also tough for me to get through. And so, while I certainly do understand why a lot of you guys probably love this movie, I just didn't get into it all that much. 32, John Woo's remake of The Killer that dropped on Peacock. This was the last movie I watched on this list, and it's a remake of John Woo's 1989 film, The Killer, but he takes that film and just turns it into this generic, by-the-numbers action movie. We've seen this type of film before. We've seen it done much better, like the original, but it removes all of the themes, the emotion, the heart. It removes all of that that was in the original killer, and it's just standard action movie direct-to-streaming stuff. 31, The Strangers Chapter 1. Now, this movie was very much marketed to be like a prequel to The Strangers. It's directed by Renny Harlin, who's directed some things that I really enjoy. Die Hard 2 and Cliffhanger and a bunch of other things. But with this one, it just feels like a lazy beat-for-beat remake of the original. It follows the exact same beats, and it doesn't do them nearly as effectively. And I'm not somebody who's even a big fan of the original Strangers film. I actually like the second film more than the first film. And so doing a remake of that with stupider characters and barely anything to change, there was just nothing new to add to the mix. Kicking off the top 30, Despicable Me 4. Now, I seem to like this movie a lot less than most people do. I know that this is a very beloved franchise that just makes a whole bunch of money at the box office. I actually grew up watching the Despicable Me movies, so it's very frustrating for me to place this movie this low on the list. Simply put, I just thought the franchise ran out of steam, and they're just milking out more stuff. If this was a Netflix sort of anthology series, I probably would have responded a little bit better to it, but as a movie released in theaters, you get a setup for a villain at the beginning of the movie that doesn't appear for the rest of the movie and then goes to the end of the movie. You get Gru performing a heist with a child. You get a plotline about Mega Minions, Lucy at a barber shop, Gru trying to play tennis, and they seem so detached and unrelated that there's just no sense of forward momentum, so I couldn't give this movie a positive review at all, really. 29, A Family Affair. A Family Affair is a Netflix original, sort of like a rom-com film starring Zac Efron, Joey King, and Nicole Kidman, where we've seen that, like, once again, we've seen this type of film before. Actually, another movie on this list is actually very similar to this, has a very similar premise to this film, The Idea of You. That one just did it so much better. What really drags this one back is that the characters are super unlikable, especially Zac Efron and Joey King. It's a totally forgettable Netflix rom-com, so yeah, there you go. Russell Crowe's The Exorcism. Now, last year, Russell Crowe did a movie called The Pope's Exorcist, and you might go into this movie thinking that those two are related. They have no correlation whatsoever, which is a little bit weird. The Exorcism is a movie about a group of people trying to do a remake of The Exorcist, and it turns out some weird things start happening. Really forgettable. Russell Crowe gives an alright performance in it, I guess, but just nothing particularly stands out. I watched the movie like last month, and I struggle right now to even remember anything that happened in the film. 27, The Garfield Movie. Now, I never grew up watching Garfield. I never grew up reading the Garfield strips, but I could already tell it's really dated to do a Garfield movie in 2024. Adding to that, it's a bunch of a recurring theme on this list, a bunch of generic stuff that we've seen before. A movie came out a couple of years ago called Strange World, has a very similar plot to this. You get him trying to reconnect with his father. His father has, like, sort of abandoned him in a way, and they're trying to reconnect. And, you know, to watch with a bunch of 10-year-olds in a theater, it's fine, but it's just, it doesn't stand out at all. I never find myself rewatching this film. 26, M. Night Shyamalan's Trap. This is a super frustrating one, because I went in this movie really excited, and I left the theater so disappointed. M. Night Shyamalan movies are always kind of hit or miss. This one has such a great premise about, like, a serial killer caught in a police trap, trying to escape. But the entire movie, or really the first half of the movie, is more focused on his daughter, M. Night Shyamalan's daughter, singing than it is on the main plot. Because what he tries to do to escape is completely ineffective. But in the second half of the movie, there's so many logic issues, things that don't quite mesh together. The ending just feels really cheap. So overall, a real M. Night Shyamalan dud that was a trap to see his daughter on a concert instead of watching a serial killer trying to escape. Number 25, Atlas. Now, this film clearly takes heavy inspiration from the Titanfall games, which I have played, and I've kind of gotten a kick out of, so I didn't hate this movie like most people did, but this is definitely not a good movie at all. Simply put, it kind of wastes its potential. It's like in a futuristic LA where AI is now everything, and this character's trying to learn how to trust AI and take down another evil AI. And keeps messaging about like AI being good. I've used the word AI so many times in this review. It just seems very niche to today's society, where now everything has to be used by AI. There's not nearly enough action as there should be. There's not nearly enough setup for what does pay off at the end. So not really one that's good all that much. 24, My Spy, The Eternal City. Now, the original My Spy was one of those movies that came out direct to streaming during COVID. And 4 years later, we got a sequel. And I forgot the original existed until we got this sequel. Very derivative of stuff like Spider-Man Far From Home, where you get this romance and a school trip in Italy. There's a plot that, once again on this list, is very forgettable. That's swept away with terrorist organizations. The humor just feels really kiddish most of the time. So, it's passable enough, but it's pretty much on par with the first film, where, I probably won't remember it in the next month or so. Number 23, The Watchers. I was pretty late to this one. This is M. Night Shyamalan's daughter's film, Ishana Night Shyamalan. She made a thriller about a group of people being stuck in a forest and being overseen by these mysterious creatures and trying to escape. It starts off pretty good, where they're establishing the rules and everything, and then at the midway point in the movie, they start revealing answers, and especially when you get to the end, it just didn't feel like it paid off very well. I really enjoyed the first half of this movie, but as soon as it started revealing answers and taking all the stuff to new extremes, and especially the ending, I overall couldn't give this one as positive a review as I would have liked to. In a Violent Nature, another one I was pretty late to. If you don't know what this is a slasher told from the perspective of the killer, and I thought that it was a very interesting thing to watch. I kind of enjoyed watching it for the first time just for the sake of seeing a slasher told from the perspective of a killer, where you just see him sneak up on people and then brutally murder them. That's kind of fun. However, this movie's just very thin on plot, and it goes on for much longer than it needs to. Part of that is because the most of the time he's just walking around, and that's pretty much it for most of the time. It does this third-person video game perspective most of the time in this movie, and so very thin on plot. One that I'm glad I watched, but it's not one that I thought worked overall due to their strengths of being told from a perspective of a killer. 21, The Instigators. From here on out, I will safely go positive on all of the rest of these movies. The next few on here are very much mixed positive, but positive nonetheless. The Instigators is the newest film from Doug Liman. It dropped on Apple TV Plus earlier in August. It stars Matt Damon and Casey Affleck, and I thought it was a fun enough, passable direct-to-streaming film, where the characters are just a little bit more charming, have a little bit more chemistry, the plot's a little bit more faster paced, and a little bit more smooth-rounded. Once again, not a very memorable film. I won't remember this movie, for the rest of the year or anything like that. It's not going to be the one I think about, but it's a passable enough direct-to-streaming movie that has a little bit more to it than a whole bunch of direct-to-streaming movies that I mentioned previously. Kicking off the top 20, MaXXXine, and this is one that I want to place higher, but there's just a whole lot of issues that I had with this film. Superficially, I liked that it had the 80s Hollywood setting. I gave it a new flair that the other two films, very different from the other two films' flair and vibe. However, I thought the plot was simply just way too predictable. From the very first scene, essentially, you kind of already know who the killer is. It doesn't take a Sherlock Holmes to discover that. I'm pretty sure everybody could figure that out right from the beginning. And so, therefore, it just doesn't have any forward momentum, because you already know who the killer is, basically, from the very beginning. Number 19, A Quiet Place Day 1. This is one that I wasn't crazy about, like a bunch of people, including you guys probably are. But I still thought it was a good enough prequel to A Quiet Place. On the positive side, the setting in New York, very loud, very noisy, and I thought that was a nice new perspective for the Quiet Place franchise, and it has some emotional resonance to the characters, very different from the ones in the previous two films. However, I didn't think that the character resonance was as effective as the previous two films, because the previous two films were very personal and more relatable because it's just a family. I also thought it didn't have nearly as enough tension than the previous two films, I still thought it was a very good, not a very good, but a solid, good enough prequel that was just very flawed for me. Number 18, If. If is John Krasinski's new film starring Ryan Reynolds about imaginary friends and trying to get them to their owners. This one, by the time you get to the end of it, does have some emotional feelings, I will admit, when you exit the film. Some nice messages. It's a fun one for the whole family to watch. However, I thought the film was very confusing with its plotting and how much information the audience actually gets to seep in. The plot just felt very confusing all throughout it. So while it did have some emotion, some effectiveness, I thought it was very confusing. Number 17, Twisters. Now, I only watched the original Twister literally the same day I watched Twisters right before I went to the theater, and I wasn't the biggest fan of it. And this one, I was quite surprised by it. It had a lot more effective character work to it than I thought. It had more fun, more memorable tornado action that I enjoyed. The plot was a lot more memorable. Like I said, I'm still not the biggest Twister fan. This is a movie which is, like, its plot, I still don't remember all the specifics of it. But that cold open of the movie was absolutely great. I love the cold open to this film. Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F. Now, I went into this one not knowing what entirely to expect. I had not seen a trailer. I just knew it was a straight to Netflix, fourth film in the franchise. Sure, why not? Watched it, and I was actually pleasantly surprised. It manages to still be a fun Beverly Hills Cop adventure. Eddie Murphy, of course, still has the charm he always has, but even our characters from the original films are still just as charming as they are. They still fit the franchise very well. Now, the plot itself feels a lot more sidelined because the characters are just so fun to be around, and that's what elevates this movie a lot. Plot itself, not entirely all that memorable, but it's still a film I was pleasantly surprised by. Kicking off the top 15, The Idea of You. The Idea of You was the movie I was talking about earlier on this list, much lower down, with a family affair, and a very similar plot, but it's handled in a much better way, where the characters are a lot more likable, relatable, and believable. It feels a lot more grounded. It actually has human emotions to it, and the characters aren't unlikable like they are in A Family Affair, where you care about the characters, and it's a nice little time. Not one I find myself re-exploring all that much, but still, much better version of A Family Affair, because it had more likable characters, and because it had human emotion. Number 14, Babes. Babes is a comedy film about a woman who gets pregnant and her trying to deal through it. Very simple plot, not really much depth with the plot, but still just a nice, fun, small comedy refresher where it's nice and relaxing to see a movie that's just about people in their normal everyday lives and their friendships and how much they mean to them. It has a little bit of sentiment to that, has a nice little ending message to it with the characters have character arcs and they close out properly. So, a movie, once again, that I don't find myself going back to a lot, but one that I'm glad I've seen and I did enjoy while watching. Number 13, The Bikeriders. The Bikeriders is an outsiders, street level, leather jacket, motorcycle riding like film, where it's set in the 60s, very much like an Outsiders type story, but a really good one at that. It's very episodic in nature, which I did not really like about the film. I think it would have worked much better as a TV show. That doesn't change the fact that you're just so compelled by these characters and the sort of family that they made in this biker group before it started. It's kind of like a tragedy about it starting to go corrupt and turn malicious, and kind of is sentimental at the same time by the time you get to the end with what it does with our characters. So, one that I actually really, really enjoyed. Number 12, Deadpool and Wolverine. This film is probably going to be a lot of people's favorites in their top 3s of the summer 2024 list. In fact, it might be some people's favorite movie of the year, and that's totally cool. I really enjoyed this film. However, it was the weakest of the 3 Deadpool movies to me, but I still thought it was a very fun time at the movies, where, of course, you get Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds having great chemistry. You got a lot of heart in the story, surprisingly. On the actual plot level, not just the character level, it's not very strong. I think it changes up the plot in the last 30 minutes in a way that I didn't find satisfying. But just a really good time at the movies that, like, if you like Deadpool, this movie offers the Deadpool and Wolverine experience. Number 11, New Life. This is where this list starts getting really wacky. New Life is an independent, very low budget, genre blender, horror, thriller, mystery, and Deadpool. It's right next to Deadpool Wolverine, which is like Deadpool Wolverine. Everybody knows what that is. But I really enjoyed what they did with New Life, where essentially this girl's on the run, and you're trying to figure out why she's on the run. Why is this government trying so hard to take her down? And when it starts revealing answers, it feels satisfied. Revealing what the movie actually is adds more genres to it in a way that it works and it blends together. Very much my type of thriller. I was invested into it. It didn't overstay its welcome, so I really, really enjoyed this film. We move into the top 10 with Cuckoo. This was the last film that I watched right before I became a sophomore. The Sunday before school started, that night we were just like, you know what, let's go see a movie, and it ended up being Cuckoo. Cuckoo is another independent horror film. This one being about a family moving to a resort, and there's some weird things happening at the resort. It's very offbeat, another one that's like elevated horror, but it's one that's a lot more to my wavelength. It's a mystery. You're trying to figure out what's going on. At the end, there are some interpretations of what could be of what's going on, and you got some great performances here. It builds intrigue correctly, so just a really nice little thriller. Number 9, The Fall Guy. Another one I'm not completely bananas about like a lot of you guys are, but I still think that this is a very, very good summer blockbuster film where if you're just in the mood to have fun, this is a great one to put on, where you get Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling, and they have great romantic chemistry throughout the movie. It's also celebrating stuntmen, it's celebrating filmmaking, and as somebody that talks about movies and loves watching movies, that's a fun treat to have. I will say, the film is way too predictable. Like, I could figure, much like, what was the movie I talked about, MaXXXine? From the very beginning, I could already tell where the movie was going. But I think this one covers it up a lot better with a better set of characters that I enjoy and just a bunch of fun action sequences. It's just a really fun film to watch. Another independent film, The Last Stop in Yuma County. This is a smaller scale thriller about a group of people who are stuck at a gas station without any gas because the gas truck has crashed. And a group of bank robbers show up to wait for the gas station to get their gas. They secretly take people hostage. More characters start getting added in. It just ratchets up the tension in a way that I thought was really good. It kept me on the edge of my seat while watching it, even at home. And so it's a film where if you like really small scale, really, really effective thrillers, this is a really underwatched movie. I highly suggest watch The Last Stop in Yuma County. Number 7, Bad Boys Ride or Die. The action movie franchise is probably my favorite movie franchise of all time. They're just kind of my go-tos when it comes to movies in general. And this one, I would say, is the strongest of the Bad Boys. I just think these movies have been getting better as they went along, where the first one's my least favorite, and the fourth one's my favorite. Of course, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence are fantastic on screen together, but you also get this emotional story where they add in the son character from the third film, which adds a lot more sort of character dynamic with a character arc you have for Mike in this film. It has some things that ties into Captain Lowry that are more kind of emotional. So it's a film that has all the action, all the humor that you want, but also having a bit of heart there that I really enjoyed while still being very entertaining. Number 6, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and this is a film that was my most anticipated film of the year going into 2024. It's not as good as I was hoping, while still being a fantastic addition to the Planet of the Apes reboot franchise. It continues the story in a way that honors the legacy of the Caesar character, while also not having to have him in the film. It expands the Planet of the Apes universe in a way where it's satisfying even 300 years later. Still the characters you still really care about. It's shown in this really epic scale while also kind of feeling very small scale at the same time. And so a film that I went into very excited. I was pleased with the results, and as somebody who loves the Planet of the Apes reboot franchise, this was a nice addition to the franchise. We move into the top 5 with Longlegs. Longlegs is another independently made horror film that had a budget of like less than $10 million. It's directed by the son of Anthony Perkins, the actor for Norman Bates. Has Nicolas Cage, Micah Monroe. It's a cop investigation thriller, very much in the vein of movies like Seven, and I really enjoyed what they did with this film. I don't love it like I did when I went out of the theater, but I still thought this was a really effective film that managed to keep you guessing on who the killer is, what he's doing. Nicolas Cage just gives a great performance. You get to the reveals at the end. It's sort of gut-wrenching at the end by the time you get to the end, but it was the right conclusion to the film. So a really well-rounded thriller, very much in the vein of movies like Seven. Number 4, Hitman. This is a direct-to-Netflix streaming movie. It's not an action movie. It is a sort of genre blender with a little bit of romance, comedy, thriller, drama. And it has a Glenn Powell in it, and I thought it just worked on all those levels. On a romance, you care about the two characters, and they make horrible decisions in the film. But they do so in a way where you can still kind of root for them, and they're still very, very charming on screen together. As a thriller, it builds tension throughout it without having to have big explosion set pieces. As a drama, you care about the characters. And so, just a really well-rounded film that kind of just works on every level. Like, if you want a Netflix movie, if you're expecting a Netflix movie, you'll be really pleasantly surprised with Hitman. Kicking off our top 3, Furiosa. This is the prequel to Mad Max Fury Road. I thought it was a nice addition to the Mad Max franchise, where it is the most epic in scale that we've ever had of the Mad Max films. You have characters you actually care about. Great performance from Anya Taylor-Joy as Furiosa, as you see her journey to become the person that she was in Mad Max Fury Road. And it was really satisfying by the time you get to the end when it leads into Mad Max Fury Road. You got some great action sequences here. And another thing here, Chris Hemsworth delivers a great performance as the villain. So as somebody who loves action movies, as somebody who loved Mad Max Fury Road, this was like a great prequel that was almost on par with Mad Max Fury Road, so I thoroughly enjoyed it. Our runner-up is Inside Out 2. Of all the movies on this list, this is probably the one that related to me the absolute most. It's about a teenager who's going through their teenage days. I'm a sophomore in high school. I am going through my teenage days even to this day, and this movie just touched on all the right heartstrings. It is so creative in the way that it visualizes teenage angst in Riley's mind. It makes Riley a lot more of a character in and of herself. It's so emotional, so poignant, so potent by the time you get to the end. And so this movie was the solidifying brick into reaffirming my taste in like Pixar, because they haven't been the brightest the past couple of years. This is easily the best Pixar movie they put out in a long time now, so I love this. However, at number 1, I think I'm going to go with Alien Romulus on this one. And no, like when I left the theater watching this movie, it was a feeling that was like indescribable, because I absolutely loved this movie. I went in with super high expectations, and those high expectations were exceeded. Fede Alvarez is just a great choice to direct the Alien movies. He directed Don't Breathe, Evil Dead 2013, and is so good at making these tense situations that people are in. While it's set in between Alien and Aliens, it also sort of like dives into new elements of how to like survive the aliens a little bit. You got some characters and themes being explored about the robots and how much you would actually trust them. Really, really tense sequences in the film. The most tense since the original Alien film. Just as an Alien fan, it works. But if you're just a fan of horror films, it also works. And I love simple, straightforward thrillers. So for me, of all the movies on this list, this is the one that had the best impact on me. It's the one that, like when I left the theater, I went, yeah, that's exactly what I love about summer blockbusters. So for me, it is my favorite movie of the summer. There you have it. That's my ranking of all 38 summer movies that I saw. Down below in the comment section, share your ranking of the summer movies that you saw over on my channel. I have more content like this. Check those out right now. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end. I will see you in the next one.